So I'm sitting down with my morning coffee, like I usually do, scanning the headlines, and I see this story that catches my eye. Now, it's a story about yet another data breach, which I know is pretty much a daily occurrence these days. I'm about to scroll past it, but this story seemed different in a really weird kind of way. Ex sheriff deputy and Hollywood actor is hacked after collecting personal info about 3 billion people. Wait, what in the world? There are just so many things that are very weird about this. Is this another one of those clickbait things where the story ends up being nothing like the headline? Well, I can't resist. Clickbait or not, I click. And that's when things got even stranger. I'm Brenton, and this is the Redacted Hacker. Have you ever Googled a friend or family member? I mean, someone that you actually know. Maybe I'm the only one that's done that here. Well, if you did do that and you started looking at the search results, well, after you got past all the Google ads, you'd see that it's often filled with these spammy looking sites that supposedly have all the info you could possibly want to know about the person that you just Googled. Well, most of the time they're just that, spam. But sometimes there are these sites that, while they still look sketchy, seem to have an extraordinary amount of info about this person that you were just looking for. I mean, they know the places that this person lived, other people that live at that address, relatives, friends, associates. It's kind of scary. Well, this story is about Salvador Bini, and he's that ex-sheriff, deputy, and actor mentioned in the headline. Apparently, he has several of these background info sites and made me wonder, how and why did he collect this personal information that ended up being hacked? Now, I'm not a big fan of giving my private information away. I mean, who is really? But everybody wants your info these days. I mean, even grocery stores want your personal shopping habits in order to sell your data for apparently a whole lot of money. I mean, I guess I could live off the grid, but I don't think that would work very well for me at this point in my career. I can still make choices, though, about where and with whom I share my data. Now, some are easy choices and others are not so easy. Sometimes it feels like it's out of my control, or at least a really tough decision. For instance, when we bought our house, the mortgage company runs a pretty thorough credit check on our financials. And when I start a new job, my employer will often run a background check to make sure I am who I say I am, and I don't know, that there aren't some outstanding warrants for my arrest or something. But I've often wondered, how do they run these checks? Obviously my bank and employer don't have this massive database of information about me. I suppose the government has lots of information about me, but do they provide access to that? So how do they verify that I am who I say I am and that nothing in my background jumps out as being a risk or a threat to them? Turns out, in addition to a lot of other services, they often use the services of companies called data brokers or data aggregators. And funny thing is, they do get some of their data from the government in a roundabout kind of way. You see, the government will post what they call public records on websites. Stuff about property taxes, voter records, and whatnot. And these data brokers will take that info, compile it, combine it with the data that they've gotten from a variety of other legitimate and maybe sometimes less than legitimate sources. They can then compare the info that you and I provide to our bank and employer and others and see how that matches up against what they have in their database. All for a fee, of course. So, as I continue reading this story, it talks about a company called National Public Data, or NPD. To be honest, NPD is not a company I've heard of before, and I looked it up, and apparently it's one of those data brokers. Now, the name National Public Data sounds very official, almost like it's a government agency or something, but it's not. Now, the company MPD was started back in 2008 by Salvatore Bini Jr., or Sal as apparently he likes to be called. But you see, I'm really getting ahead of myself here. We're jumping into the middle of Sal's story by doing this, so let's rewind a bit. Sal is an ex-sheriff deputy and Hollywood actor. Wait, an actor? Okay. I had to go look this guy up. And turns out he has an IMDb page, and as of today, it hasn't been taken down. Since I'm not familiar with Sal Bini, the actor, I took a quick look at his bio. On there, he says he started his acting career in 6th grade play of Annie, and that he landed his first national television role on Burt Reynolds' Night Train. Now, I am not an expert on everything Burt Reynolds, but I've never heard of a movie that he was in called Night Train. So I took a little bit more time and looked around in IMDb and discovered that Night Train is actually the name of an episode in Burt Reynolds' TV show, BL Stryker, from the 1980s.
I want my locket now!
You're acting like a kid.
Tonight on BL Stryker.
Well, I could deduce from that possibly you like me.
And you'd be wrong.
Marion Martin was a witness to a murder.
Stryker will be killed, along with the little girl.
What if someone shoots you?
Well, nobody's gonna shoot me. I'm not gonna let him.
It was a television series about a private eye, Burt Reynolds, who lives on a houseboat and solves crimes. And the show lasted a couple seasons. Sal might have been stretching things a bit, but it looks like he did play an unnamed student in the last episode of the show. Anyway, with his acting resume and experience in hand, in 2001, Sal decides to create a new movie studio called Jericho Pictures Incorporated. Wait, let me make sure I have this right. A guy gets a role as an extra in high school, works as a sheriff deputy in Florida for a while, and then starts a movie studio. In what universe does this lead to National Public Data and this enormous database with info about every American? Well, it turns out that National Public Data, the data broker, is actually Jericho Pictures Incorporated, the movie studio. You see, in the United States, if you want to create a new business, you can do that fairly easily. You can create a corporation, a limited liability company or LLC, or even a sole proprietorship, which is just an unincorporated business operating as a person. But if you don't want to do any of that, you can also create what's called an assumed name or DBA, doing business as, and you can just reuse an existing company. Well, that's what Sal ended up doing. You see, National Public Data officially is Jericho Pictures Incorporated, doing business as National Public Data. Crazy, right? So you have a movie extra who is an ex-sheriff and a movie studio that is also a data broker. You really can't make up this kind of stuff. But the thing is, none of this data broker stuff seems to line up with what we know of Sal's Hollywood dreams. Well, it turns out a movie studio doesn't really make any money unless they create some shows that actually make some money. And you can't make a good show without, you got it, money. Makes sense, right? Well, if you're Sal, you might be thinking, how am I going to fund this very expensive entertainment venture that ideally will land me a job as a Hollywood producer? I know. I'll collect information about everybody in the United States and then sell it. Okay, that probably wouldn't have been my first or really even second idea, but I guess it worked for Sal, at least for a while. On the entertainment side, it looked like things were starting to come together for him. You see, Sal and his wife May created a reality show called Country Days.
Hey everyone, I'm Sal, the CEO of Everything Country. You know the best part about owning your own
Then
business?
in 2019,
You get
it
to hire
seemed
all
like
your
he
friends.
might have lined up his shop for something even bigger.
Actually, my producing partners were here yesterday, and we are beginning to develop a new Buck Rogers series.
That was Gil Gerard. That's right. The same Gil Gerard that played Buck Rogers in the TV show from the early
In the year
1980s.
1987, NASA launched the last of America's deep space probes. Aboard this compact starship, a lone astronaut, Captain William Buck Rogers, was to experience cosmic forces beyond all comprehension. In a freak mishap, his life support systems were frozen by temperatures beyond imagination. Ranger 3 was blown out of its planned trajectory into an orbit 1,000 times more vast. An orbit which was to return Buck Rogers to Earth 500 years later.
You see, Sal and Gil were going to release a sequel to the show, Buck Rogers in the 25th Century, but they ran into a little problem.
Wow! It's entitled 2491, but it's not Buck Rogers. In case anyone involved in the lawsuit is looking at this, it's not really Buck Rogers. It's not called Buck Rogers. No character is called Buck Rogers. But it's set in 2491, which is about 450 years in the future.
There was a lawsuit, but they kept moving forward. They did have to rename the show to 2491 and remove any mention of Buck Rogers from the show, though. So basically, Buck Rogers, but not Buck Rogers. In fact, if you go to Gil Gerard's IMDb Pro page right now, he is still listed as executive producer for Jericho Pictures. Now, I'm pretty sure that's an oversight, and his people will probably remove that as soon as this video comes out, but it definitely bumps up the crazy factor on this story. So while all this is going on, Jericho Pictures, doing business as National Public Data, is continuing to collect info on countless Americans, accumulating over 3 billion records. 3 billion? Is that even legal? Can you just create a giant database of personal information about people and then sell it? Well, it turns out data brokers are generally legal in the United States. That's right. If a data broker is using the public records to obtain their information, they are in legal territory. So what exactly is a data broker? Well, I looked it up, and California law defines a data broker as a business that knowingly collects and sells to third parties the personal information of a consumer with whom the business does not have a direct relationship. Okay, that's just a fancy way of saying they collect everyone's personal data and sell it to whoever pays. I mean, we're talking about criminal records, background checks, shopping history, your favorite pizza topping. If your data was collected, there's a good chance that they've got it. It's kind of like a commodities market where the commodity being traded is your personal information. I mean, do they get together in groups and go, hey, I'll trade you 5 of my New Yorkers for 3 of your Texans? I mean, it's crazy, but apparently it's legal. So things are going well for Sal. He has several businesses, a lucrative asset now, and a potential television deal, and dreams of becoming a Hollywood star. But in December of 2023, a new player in the game starts unraveling all of Sal's dreams. A hacker who goes by the name of US DoD decided to target NPD. Now, US DoD is actually Luan Gonçalves, a 33-year-old man from Brazil, and he's actually made several international headlines in the past few years. He hacked into multiple airlines, the FBI, CrowdStrike, oil companies, pharmacies, and more. he was also behind the massive LinkedIn breach that was leaked a year or so ago. But why did he target NPD? I mean, there are a lot of data brokers and data aggregators out there right now. Well, there are a couple good reasons NPD was an attractive target to a hacker like Blue One. You see, Sal had collected a lot of databases containing valuable data, and he advertised those on his website. His website proudly offered over 2.2 billion records on people, a national criminal record database, sex offender database, records of employment, voter records, businesses, records for birth, death, marriages, divorce. The list goes on and on. But not only this, but Sal and NPD offered something called an API. Now, not to get too technical, but an API is just a way for computer systems to be able to talk to each other in an agreed upon way. But the benefit that an API provided Luan was that now he could easily automate a complete download of the data in a structured and organized way. But all this is assuming that Luan could get past the security on NPD's site. I mean, if you have data on almost every American, it would probably be locked up like Fort Knox and protected by, I don't know, lasers and stuff, right? I mean, it must have taken some pretty elite hacking skills to be able to break into a data vault like that. I'm sure this US DoD guy, Luan, must have used, you know, those super cool methods of hacking that you see in the movies where the room is all dark and monitors only show the green text, and they successfully hack it in 30 seconds or less. Well, it turns out that he probably did hack it in about 30 seconds or less because it didn't require any of the cutting edge hacking tools. In a strange twist, we learned that NPD was posting the admin password for this super secure vault on their public website. I'm not even sure why someone posts a file of their passwords on the web, but the fact is he did, and the file wasn't actually taken down until just a week or so ago. The level of crazy on the story just keeps going up. So Luan gets into the NPD system and he finds a treasure trove of data in there. What should he do with all this data? Well, a few months after the hack, NPD data, which, well, you know, is just data about you and I, started popping up for sale on breach forums. Luan was trying to sell these 3 billion records for $3.5 million. Well, some time goes by, and I don't think Luan got any of this money because by July of 2024, we saw 4 terabytes of this personal data hit the dark web for free.
This morning, consumer advocates are sounding the alarm about a massive data breach that could impact billions of people.
Hackers may have gained access to billions of people's personal information, and in the U.S., that includes social security numbers. So how serious is this, and what do you need to know? We're joined by live by cybersecurity.
Wait, 3 billion, wait. Aren't there only like 300 and something million people in the US? I also looked up social security numbers, and the government has actually only issued around 450 million social security numbers since the program even started. Now, I'm not a math expert, but the numbers don't seem to add up to 3 billion here. Well, digging a little deeper, we can see that they're actually talking about 3 billion rows of data and not 3 billion individual people. And a lot of those rows are out of date and inaccurate. You know, when like you're filling out those forms and they say, list every address that you ever lived at since you were born. Well, all those addresses are going to be tied to your social security number as rows in this database. It also looks like some of the info in this data dump is just plain wrong. Ugh, what a mess. Mr. Bini is now being summoned to appear before Congress, and several lawsuits have been filed against Sal and Jericho Pictures, and more seem to be popping up every day. Oh, and NPD did finally admit to the breach, but they claimed that only 1.3 million people were affected by the breach. If the actual breach contained even close to the 3 billion records, that would mean that there was on average, 2,000 or more records per person in their database? That also seems a little bit unlikely. Well, we may not know for a long time exactly how many Americans were affected by the breach, but experts pretty much agree that this was the largest breach of Social Security numbers ever recorded. The timing of this thing is also unfortunate, as it's just months away before a pivotal US presidential election. And it really doesn't take much imagination to see how this data could be weaponized. I mean, you have millions of Social Security numbers and other personal information, including voter registration, combined with the latest cybersecurity and hacking tools and cutting-edge AI. Not good. So, what can we do? Well, in response to this, the Federal Trade Commission, FTC, announced that the 3 national credit reporting agencies, Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion, have permanently extended a program that let you check your credit report at all 3 of these agencies once a week for free, instead of their earlier program of once a year. But how can we protect our personal information and the personal information of our customers? Well, as a customer, so much of this is really going to be out of your control. You will still have to do a credit check if you want a line of credit. You will still have to submit a background check if you want a job in security. I mean, even doctors and dentists' office are trying to constantly get me to scan my driver's license and store it in their database. I'm in the cybersecurity world. I know where this is going to end up. They're usually so nice and sweet as they try to assure me that they store everything securely. Oh boy. Well, if you are a company and your company is required to store customers' personal information, you can do 2 things. One, you can make sure that you're storing only the data that you absolutely must. I mean, if you don't need the data, don't store it. Don't even collect it. And 2, secure the data that you do store with solid and mature cybersecurity products. This is not the time to try out your do-it-yourself skills. And last but not least, if you are a consumer, I will give you one more bit of advice, and I urge you in the strongest sense possible to follow this advice. Freeze your credit. If you don't know what that means, or you've never done it before, take a look at the show notes below for details. Freezing your credit with all 3 credit bureaus could save you a whole lot of pain that comes with identity and credit theft. Trust me on this one. Now, this story is still evolving, so stay tuned to this channel for more updates. And if Sal manages to survive this whole ordeal, maybe he finally has the story he needed to make that blockbuster movie. You never know. Stranger things have happened. Well, I'm Brenton House, and this has been another episode of The Redacted Hacker. Until next time.